Hello and welcome to the Low Tox Life podcast.
So these little things, small things done consistently make a difference because they ultimately become habits. Maybe you buy 1 bushel of kale that's organic because you can't buy a lot of that. Okay, so buy that 1 bushel. Maybe you buy organic cucumbers, whatever it is. But just do one thing, and that, the more self-care, I say this in the book too, the more self-love. The more self-love, the more self-care. It's a cycle. Cycles. Like I did that for myself today. Don't focus on what you didn't do. Focus on what you can do and what you did do. So today I bought a bushel of kale. Today I had a salad.
Hello, I'm Alex Stewart, your host. I'm thrilled to have you join me and Dr. Andrea Sullivan today for this show. Now, when I'm researching people to have on the show, I do a bit of a deep dive into their work. I came across this lecture she had given where she stepped through the history of African herbal medicine, the way the African slaves who were brought over to America had hidden various plant medicines in their hair, in their pockets, in their lockets, however they possibly could, to preserve their medicines and plant them wherever they might arrive. And it was the most fascinating lecture. So while I was going to interview her on her second book, The Sacrifices of Superwomen, I could not help but have her dive into that history as we start. When we think of medicines that have been used forever, we often hear about traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years, so wise. Ayurveda, thousands of years, so wise. But we don't often hear about African herbal medicine, and I felt like it absolutely deserves its pride of place in that company. And I was thrilled to accidentally stumble upon it, not having realized the lengths to which people went to preserve the ability to use their medicines, and I simply had to include that in the show. So a quick message from our partners and then straight into this fascinating show. All of October you have 15% off at Block Blue Light, and this is an international offer. Your code is LowToxLife and you can head to blockbluelight.com. They help you keep blue light out of your evenings, keep you from experiencing computer blue light strain during the day, and have a bunch of lighting options, mask options for sleeping to keep that light junk out overnight and allow you to get deep rest, as well as super high quality red light panels, which the research shows us helps for tissue, joint, muscle, bone repair through to mitochondrial support, energy, inflammation, and even hair stimulation and skin support for things like eczema, acne, psoriasis, dermatitis, also rosacea. Enjoy that 15% off with code LowToxLife for October. It's an international offer. Let's head to the show. Hello, Andrea. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm very well, and I'm very happy to be discussing this book that you have put out into the world, to have the gift of an hour with you to discuss naturopathic medicine, not only for its awesomeness in itself and your practice of it for 4 decades, but to also bring the racial injustice piece to that, and the stress that is unique to the minority world, I feel is a really special opportunity. So thank you for being here with us.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I have to admit I was surprised when I received it, your being in Australia and my being here, but I'm grateful for it. But it's a small world, especially getting smaller with social media, etc. So
it is, and we got our own dirt here. Now, I was researching for this book and I came across, I don't know how I found it, this lecture that you gave that I could buy for like $11, and it intrigued me because it was about African herbal medicine, and the things that you uncovered it blew my mind how much has been appropriated that African people knew all along and were using very effectively for centuries, if not thousands of years. Oh my gosh. Can we actually start with a brief history of African herbal medicine? Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. That's okay. I know you asked me that question. I said, sure, that's fine. Um, yeah, so I wrote this paper several years ago. Well, first of all, in my first book, A Path to Healing, A Guide to Wellness for Body, Mind, and Soul, there is a chapter called Naturopathy, Its Roots.
Mm.
So, and with that chapter, I'm discussing how naturopathy began as herbal medicine in this country because the master couldn't afford to continue to use all of the Herculean efforts that Benjamin Rush and his guys were using, bloodletting and leeching and acrimony and mercury. It was killing the slaves. So they
Mm.
couldn't really do it that way because that would be a detriment to their income, to their economy. So, they would say, Sally, go make up something for this cold that Thomas has. And Sally would go off into the bushes and into the weeds and find something that looked like horehound, perhaps, or eyebright, and bring it back and make up some compound and give it to Thomas. And voila, Thomas would be better. So
Mm.
the master knew that this was working and also used it for his own family, not just for the slaves, but for his own family, because as I said, the heroic medicine at the time wasn't doing the job. And
Mm.
so, and those plants were brought over from Africa in their hair, in their little piece of loincloth, in an amulet around their neck. Somehow they were able to get it over to America, and they would put it in their dooryard gardens, as they were called, right in front of the little cabin that they had, and they would grow them. And so that was, yes, the beginning. And of course, not to leave out the indigenous people had a hand in it too because they could tell them somehow, I don't know what language, if any, other than pointing and experimenting, they did in order to understand that this plant can create this effect as well. So between the enslaved Africans and the indigenous people, they came up with a system of medicine.
Wow.
Fast forward, then you have the Thompsonian era and Jeffersonian era that, some of the slave masters would indeed have their slaves go to these people. And there was a whole movement that started that was the precursor to naturopathy subsequent to the African slave use. So that part was never talked about in my education. And so
Mm.
when I came upon it, I had to include it in my first book. And I've actually recently asked that in Bastille, I think they do, but I've actually recently asked for it to be included in part of the curriculum for Sonoran University, which is where I'm on the board of directors. So it's an important piece, not just because I'm African American, but because it's important, because it's a
It's
true
important to the history of naturopathic
history.
medicine practice. Mm.
So, the healthcare system at that time was mostly herbal until after World War II, when they began to have penicillin, et cetera, and then they would have the schools and the Flexner Report, which was based on a Johns Hopkins model, would then close all the naturopathic schools as well as the African American schools, except for Howard. Howard was the only medical school that they allowed to remain open, but the rest of the schools they closed, and all of the other quote naturopathic schools they closed.
Yeah, and this part I find really interesting because what a lot of, let's call them very famous doctors with big Instagram accounts, they often talk about Rockefeller and, stamping out all the natural stuff, but I've never heard, never once have I heard the implication that that has on also stamping out African herbal medicine, indigenous herbal medicine. And I really find that to be um, a very interesting piece of this, where we could all really start to lean into the incredible amount of wisdom and the hardship with which they tried to bring it over and preserve it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like most of what was stamped out of us when we became enslaved. That was no different. And unfortunately, the Thompsonian methods and what was going on at that time from Caucasians, that was stamped out because the Flexner Report just said that it doesn't compare to the standard of Johns Hopkins.
And
And
can we expand on Thompsonian and
Oh,
just because people won't know what that
right,
means.
right, right. So
Mm,
Thomsonian was just, I don't want to say just, it was a system that used herbal medicine
hmm
from American herbs. And it was a system that focused on diet and lifestyle. Again, kind of a precursor to naturopathic medicine. And it was a system that was working and trying to create a different way and separate themselves from Benjamin Rush using all of the substances that were so harsh and were killing people. So
mm,
they were trying to find a different way. They borrowed or took or stole the information from the African slaves to create that, but ultimately the Flexner report, which was a report that was asked to be written by Rockefeller to sample or to have as a standard Johns Hopkins. So once that happened, that was the nail in the coffin. There were no more naturopathic schools or movements. There were no more, as I said, African American medical schools. And it was just a time to just proceed with big pharma and to keep that system going. And
mm,
so now that's what we have, which is crazy because I always like to say this: you don't get a headache from a lack of aspirin. You don't get hypertension from lisinopril, a lack of lisinopril. You just don't. These are not things that make any common sense, but they make a lot of money. And
mm,
that's the issue. That's the issue. So it doesn't matter that the sick care system is creating more sickness or illness. It only matters that people are not getting better, not really, so they can create more pharmacies and substances. I mean, that's really the bottom line. That's what's driving it all, in my opinion. Now, that does not mean that there are not allopathic physicians who have good hearts and are really understanding that this is not okay. That does not mean that, because there are some good allopathic physicians and they do understand what they're doing. But as as someone said to me, if they are not talking about diet, then they're just drug pushers. And that is true. Because as early as 1903, or even earlier, Thomas Jefferson said the physician of the future will interest his patients in diet and frame and wellness, not in pharmaceuticals. And this was in the very early 1800s, but that hasn't happened yet. It just hasn't happened.
no. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out because we've made incredible advances in saving lives at the crisis
Yeah,
end of things, but
exactly.
we've turned the
Exactly.
whole of medicine into
Right,
crisis management, which
right,
is
right, right.
ridiculous when you have 100 steps before you get to
That's
most
right.
crises
And I
in health.
always say, what are you doing at the front end of life? You don't want to
Mm,
wait till the back end of life to suddenly do everything and be tied up to some tubes. What are you doing now so that you prevent that? Which is the
mm.
beauty of naturopathy because it's prevention as well as cure. It's not just cure. So you
Yeah.
go to a naturopath with the hope and the goal that they will instruct you because doctor means teacher. It does not mean God. Doctor means teacher. So are you teaching the patient how to take care of their frame? Are you teaching the patient about diet? Are you teaching the patient about how their mental, emotional state affects their physical body? Because if they're not, then that's a problem. And one of the problems in this sick care system is that doctors don't take time to listen to our stories. You
Mm,
cannot treat a person without knowing their story. It's just not possible effectively. It's just not possible because that story is where the stress is that creates the inflammation that creates the disease. But we don't pay attention to well, naturopaths do and homeopaths certainly do, but allopathic physicians do not pay attention to the stories. And
mm.
that's a problem. That's an issue.
Yeah. Well, and it's very hard to pay attention to a story in 7 minutes.
In 5 minutes, right? But you're
Yes.
giving them seven. That's good. That's
Ah,
good.
we're a bit more generous here. Actually, our general practitioner visits are 15 minutes. That's the shortest.
Okay.
So very generous in our system by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go back to how you became a naturopath and a homeopath because it didn't start that way. You were
No, it didn't.
literally the first African American woman to study sociology and criminology at the university you attended.
University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. That is correct.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a professor at Cheyney State University who suggested, because I was going to go to Atlanta to go into psychiatric social work, and he
hmm
suggested, why don't you look at University of Pennsylvania. They have a new degree in criminology and sociology. And my interest was really piqued as a master's. And so I checked it out. I said, yeah, all right. And it was home because I was in Philadelphia. I lived in Philadelphia with my parents. And so I pursued that and thought, okay, I could do this. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll get a PhD because they suggested that I get a PhD. And I thought, okay, I'll do that too. Yeah, after
You
a
were
while,
very
I
receptive,
was very
Andrea. Yeah,
receptive to it.
sure.
It also helped that I got a fellowship.
Yeah.
So that was a good thing. So this professor, though, also was one of my professors that I had for sociology who talked about African American people in the South using herbal medicine, as they still do today. And
Mm.
they called it the secret rooms because they don't want others, they don't even want their own doctors to know about it sometimes because they'll be teased and they'll be harassed. I mean, you shouldn't take that, you should take this. So it doesn't give them much support to
Mm.
announce that this is what they're doing. So anyway, he told me check it out and go see. So I did. I got a master's. I got a PhD. Yes, I was the only African American woman to do that in the class. And at that time, it was horrible because
I was going to ask your
we're talking the
experience.
70s.
Mm.
And whenever the professor, this particular professor would say that African Americans create more crime because our brains are smaller, everybody in the class would turn around and look at me. And it was just, coming from high school where I was told I should be a domestic worker and I shouldn't even think about going to college. And then somehow my father reminded me that I got a D in typing, so I decided I would probably go to college. And
That's the best reason to propel a gal forward.
I think
Love
so.
that.
Um, so I said, okay, I'll try college. So they took me to college. And then I went on to graduate school because I really enjoyed school. But nonetheless, so here I am in this PhD program. Then I was asked to go to teach at Howard. So that's how I got to DC. And I taught at Howard University for a few years, and it was wonderful. I loved teaching, but the subject matter began to really get me because I knew that the system was already designed to take African Americans from high school or lack thereof to jail. I mean, there was no in between.
So
So
this was, and is this kind of this is how we're going to morph the slave trade. We're going to,
exactly,
right,
exactly.
yeah, free
And we're
labor.
going to pay them $1 an hour to make some
Mm.
license plates, or 50 cents, I think it was at that time. And we'll, keep the system going. So that's exactly right. But I was a great teacher, they said, and I enjoyed it. And I thought, this isn't life-giving. So then I was asked to go to New York to head the National Urban League's Administration of Justice. So I did that for 2 years. Again, my soul, my heart was just not happy. So then I was asked to come back to DC and be a special assistant in Patricia Roberts Harris' cabinet, who was the first African American woman
Oh,
to
yeah.
be a secretary at HUD under President Carter. So I'm really dating myself now. That's fine. So I did that. Again, didn't like it. And we didn't get along. We had a, a problem, let's put it that way, outside of the office in the streets, a protest. And they had come from Philadelphia on buses. And the secretary asked me to tell the protesters one thing and tell the news media something else. And I just
Ooh.
couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. And so I knew that my time there was very brief, if not that by the
Mm.
weekend. And so and I was tired all the time. I had a face full of acne. I was 30 pounds overweight. I was just miserable. And a friend said, you should check out this naturopath because I didn't have a diagnosis. I just didn't feel well. So I
Mm.
went to New York every month and saw Dr. James D'Adamo, who's now gone on. And every month from the first visit after hearing my story, he said, you should be a naturopath. And I said, now remember, this is the early 80s now. And I said,
Mm.
excuse me, sir, just give me some of those bat feathers or whatever you boil up in the back room. And I'm going back to DC. Because nobody heard of naturopathy then. Who in the world heard of that? I had never even heard of it, but I decided to go because it
Mm.
was about diet, nutrition, and all this stuff. So he gave me homeopathic remedies. He gave me some supplements. And I started looking and feeling so much better. Within 3 months, 2 months, I thought, what is this stuff? So I
Mm.
went back to Howard and took zoology and pre-med courses because I was not a pre-med major. And then I literally sold everything and moved to Seattle because I said, if I'm going to be a naturopath, I'm at least go to an accredited school, because there was no other accredited school at the time. Bastyr University was the only accredited school. So that's what I did. And I cried every single day for a year, every day,
Because?
because I was completely out of my element.
Mm.
I had no friends. All of the teachers were talking about the things that would happen to Caucasian people if this happened, and the color of their skin, they would turn red. I mean, there just was nothing there that was for me. And then people would say to me,
Wow. So
can I,
everything was in the context of
everything,
specifically Caucasian? They would literally
exactly,
say that?
exactly. Yeah.
From a
Fair,
medicine with roots in your
right.
people.
Exactly. Fair skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, everything. And
Mm.
my father called me after my second year on my birthday. I mean, he called me all the time, but he said, "You don't sound good." I said, "I'm not doing good." I was having an ambulatory nervous breakdown. I was like freaked out. And so I went home for a year because I could not stand another day there. I mean, it was just, people would say, "Can I touch your hair? Can I be your friend? Because I don't have any black friends. I don't know any black people." And I'd be like, "That's your business. I'm not interested in that. Leave me alone. No, you can't touch my hair. Leave me alone."
Maybe ask me what my favorite subject that we're studying is first before you just launch right into that. That's crazy. Oh my goodness.
Well, again, it
I
was
just
the
want to go
80s.
back and hug that young Andrea. That's
Yeah,
awful.
yeah. So it's like,
Mm.
just a series of microaggressions and macroaggressions. And I'm sure looking back on it, they didn't mean any harm. They just didn't know.
They didn't know. Yeah.
Just ignorance is just a
It's
terrible
incredible
thing.
that you can have that compassion, but it is ignorance at the end of the
Yeah,
day. They did
yeah,
not
it's
know.
ignorance. That's exactly
Mm.
right. And then a woman who I thought was my good friend ultimately turned out not to be. When I say she was my good friend, she invited me over to her families for Thanksgiving, and everything was going so well, blah, blah, blah. Probably a year later, her husband and we were having dinner with her husband, and it was the time of Rodney King. You might remember Rodney King, who was
I do.
beaten. And he said, "What difference does it make that they treated Rodney King like that?" Well, I turned the table over in the restaurant, Alex. It was not a behavior I was proud of, but it was just a
Oh,
reflex.
you really did? Like
I
this isn't
really,
a metaphor?
no, this is not a metaphor.
Wow.
I really did. I just found myself going, "What?" And I just exploded. I just
Yeah.
exploded. So I knew it was time to go home. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was time to
yeah,
go home. But what that represents, like what we were talking about before, 100 steps happen before the crisis.
yes,
What I'm picking up on there is 100, if not thousands of steps happen before someone who has been profiled their whole lives blows top.
right,
Like, and
right,
I'm not saying everyone will, of course,
right, right.
but it sure makes it understandable why you flipped the table that day.
Yeah. It was pretty dramatic. And of course, I haven't spoken to her since.
Mm,
And I'm the godmother of her child. But I couldn't, if her child walked right in here right now, I wouldn't know him.
mm.
So, yeah. So it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. But that's the way life was then, and that's the way it probably is now. Anyway, but that's that's part of my history. So fast forward, I chose to participate and get more involved in my spiritual group.
Mm,
And I did that, and I realized who I am, which is a child of God, and who everybody else is, which is a child of God, and that forgiveness and the light are critical. Acceptance is the first law of spirit, and I work at that all the time. And forgiveness is also part of that package. And so that keeps me sane, and that keeps me understanding that I can be a better person. I can be the light. I can show the way. I can do the things I was put here to do. And so that's what I do. And so every day I do that with my patients. Every day I remind them of who they are. Every day I remind them that they are here to because they have a purpose. And if their piece of the puzzle isn't planted, then someone else's piece can't fit in there. And they have to know that. They have a reason for being here. You're not just dropped here out of all the infinite possibilities. Nobody just dropped you here for no reason. There's a reason. So let's get to see what that reason is. And first, you have to be healthy to do that.
Our major partner, AusClimate, is an Australian offer and they give you 10% off with the code LowToxLife all year round. A question I get asked often is, do I need a dehumidifier, an air filter, or both? And the thing to remember is an air purification helps reduce the toxic burden of your indoor air across all types of things, from pollens, dust mite, mold, VOCs from building materials. It reduces the level of toxins in your indoor air. Dehumidification reduces the moisture in your indoor air, helping you prevent the growth of mold and the contamination of your soft furnishings, clothes, and of course yourself. Because when it's over 60% humidity, mold is then given the perfect environment to grow. All it needs is dust particles or any kind of soft furnishing that it can grab onto, and it will literally start its job of multiplying and decomposing things. So dehumidification is for moisture control, reduction, and of course, therefore, the prevention of the growth of mold in your indoor environment. And air purification is for the overall reduction of toxic burden of a multitude of things for your indoor air. So hopefully that helps answer that question. A big thank you to AusClimate for being our partner, and let's get into the show. Yes, that is so key, Andrea. I talk about this often where, getting the health right is so powerful. It's not selfish, because if you are healthy, you can contribute. If you are healthy, you can be creative. But then the complexity of the layers on top of that, of these times, I find really interesting, because as we started, the erosion of the middle class and lower class any opportunity and prosperity, it's dwindling because of this hyper greed we're seeing. And I find more and more people stressed, more and more people trying to say, why can't I get well? And victim blaming themselves. I haven't done the protocol right. I'm like, well, there's a lot going on that's actually playing into this. And I think that spiritual fitness, I talked about it with Marianne Williamson just a couple of weeks ago on the show, is a huge part of that. And that doesn't need to be a religion. It can be in spirit, with a sense of being plugged into something bigger than yourself, and all living beings and our planet. I think that's the work ahead.
Right, right. And yeah, I mean, religion has a place, certainly, but for me, religion is about the building, meaning the church, and people, but it's not, God didn't say the word was made building. God, the thing says the word was made flesh. And so I take that seriously. And it's really important because, especially for African American women, no, not just African American women, for all women, but of course African American women, because we are denigrated and disparaged and put down and everything else. But if you look at the history of women generally, is to say, especially in this country, or maybe in Australia, I'm not sure about your history, but we couldn't even get a credit card till 1970.
Yeah, we were 1975.
Okay,
So.
if it wasn't your husband or somebody, some male figure, forget it. You couldn't do that. Couldn't go to medical school, couldn't go be an attorney, couldn't do so many, couldn't own property, couldn't get the kids, forget having a lawsuit, in terms of getting your children. None of that. None of that. So that kind of energy is where the United States is, or some people in the United States are trying to take us back to, quite frankly. It's a very dangerous time. It's a very dangerous time. We have to be mindful that there are things we must do to stop that behavior. And I don't want to get political here. I want to stay focused on the topic, but we have to be well in order to do it.
We
And
do.
it's not selfish. It's not selfish to say, no, I can't do it Tuesday, but I can do it Thursday, because Tuesday I have my exercise class. Or no, I can't do it Wednesday, but I can do it Monday because I have to do so-and-so for myself. But we are so busy, women generally, and certainly African American women historically, taking care of everybody else except ourselves. That's what we've been known to do, which is what prompted my most recent book, The Sacrifices of Superwomen. because when I came upon the statistic that we die younger and faster than other women from breast cancer, even though we don't get it more often, I was like, whoa, what is this about? So I had to begin digging. And primarily, if you, in the beginning, I have some quotes from African American women who say, some other time just never comes. I'm gonna do it some other time, but it never comes. I'm gonna do this first, I'm gonna do that first, I'm gonna do this, but for me, it never comes. I don't like to ask for help. I don't feel I'm worthy of the help. See, these are all things that have been ingrained in us, really, from slavery and passed down through generations, that we are not good enough. We're certainly not pretty enough because we do not have straight hair. We do not have thin lips. We do not have thin noses. We do not have blue eyes. So all of these things continue to mount on our delicate systems. When I was growing up, everything was white. White bread, white milk, white flour, white rice, white everything.
Well, a
White.
lot of those foods is what got us into this health mess.
That's true. That's exactly
Yeah.
true. So
Mm.
everything was just white all the time. There was nothing that looked like me on television, except for maybe Tonto, who rode around the same rock every week in
Yeah, I
a
was
Lone
actually
Ranger.
I watched a fantastic documentary last week about the history of African Americans in television and film.
Uh-huh.
And I can't remember which actor talked about it, but he said, I remember being a kid living in the projects, and there was one person who had a TV, and he had a bell on his balcony that every time a black person was in a show, he would ring it so everyone in the building could come and watch the black person on television and celebrate. And it was just such a powerful story, when you grow up white and sheltered somewhat from other
Sure.
people's, we
Sure.
just do.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
any white person who can't see that for us, they'll start looking because you'll realize.
Right.
And you hear these stories and you think, I can't imagine the same thing happening for, my great uncle telling me a story like that, because that just was not the reality.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the history of this country is sad and getting worse, actually.
Mm,
However, I also believe that um, the darkness has to dissipate and the old system has to fade before the light can be forthcoming. So
mm,
that is my prayer. That is my hope. That is what I believe is happening, that old systems are going to be fading and new light is going to be coming into the planet, not just
yeah.
to America, but into the entire planet. Because this darkness, especially here in the DC, Maryland area, we have so many people that are now out of work, of course, because of the government, the Doge, and then now because of the shutdown. So we're kind of swirling in this energy of negativity,
Mm,
and it's affecting everybody.
mm,
And so on top of having diabetes, then you have to deal with this.
yeah.
So it's not there's no room to breathe almost. It's like, how am I going to get out of this? What are we going to do? And every single time I have a patient, the first 5 minutes is dedicated to their concerns about what's happening in America. They just cannot not talk about it.
Mm,
Just cannot not talk about it. And
yeah.
to talk about it just increases their stress, which increases their issues, in my opinion.
Mm.
And then other stresses, other stresses. So I
Well,
really,
and
go
we
ahead.
have these things that, oh, sorry, that's my
Oh,
gorgeous
right.
nephew when he was a baby. It's his birthday week, so I always put whatever nephew's birthday week it is,
Well,
they're my
that's
screensaver.
nice. That's
Yeah.
nice.
And these phones and
Yes.
the tech algorithms are like adding an extra layer of stress onto
Mm-hmm.
things with the prioritization of sensationalist,
Mm-hmm.
outrageous, like the worst of the worst, and the worst hot take, and the most revolting words. That's the stuff we all see the most of, which I think then um, digs into our spiritual fitness somewhat if we
Sure.
we don't remove some of that excess toxicity so that we can actually focus on improving society.
Yeah, well, I tell my patients or ask them to just take a diet from the news for a week.
Mm,
So you're not
Mm.
going to miss anything. If you're supposed to know something, you'll know it. Somebody will tell you something. If somebody gets hurt or shot or dead or dies, you'll know. But other than that, it's just too much. It's just
Mm.
absolutely too much bad news. We haven't had any good news since the Chilean miners were released, and that was
Mm.
15 years ago. Seriously,
Oh God.
10 years ago. I mean, it's just incredible how much
Mm.
bad news there is. And then we wonder why we have hypertension or diabetes because that promotes habits that can create those behaviors. And
Yeah, coping
stop.
habits,
Yeah,
right? Now,
yeah.
you talk about stress, like you really take a lot of time to unpack this in the book because of the foundational implication of it in disease
Hmm.
progression.
Hmm.
Can we spend some time there? I founded Low Tox Life in 2009, and as the community grew, I started to identify areas that people needed structured learning. And that is when the first e-course, Go Low Tox, was born in 2014. Since then, I've worked with scientists and health professionals to bring you low-cost courses to help you shortcut your goals with whatever you're challenged by right now. So whether you're new to going low tox and you'd love a framework and some really helpful suggestions across 22 different topics covering everyday life, or maybe you're working on an inflammation picture and you just want some help to calm the farm, whether you're on a fertility journey, either having trouble or wanting to optimize, we literally have courses for these and more. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the course tab, and enjoy.
Sure, sure.
Mm.
Yeah, the stress of sexism, which we just
Mm.
talked about briefly in terms of women just being put down all the time and even now. And then, of course, taking away Roe v. Wade, just doesn't seem to be any respect for
Mm.
women. There's an attempt in the government to look like they respect women by pointing them to different cabinet heads. But quite honestly, most of them don't even know what they're doing. And this
Mm.
is the feedback that I've gotten from my patients who work in those situations, whether it's Department of Housing or whether it's Department of Education or Department of Transportation or whatever. They don't know what they're doing. So, okay, that's their attempt to promote women, fine, but it's not working.
Mm.
And so we know that the reason why we have this whole superwoman complex, if you will, for African Americans is because we were so disparaged so early on with images like Aunt Jemima and these things that just really didn't exist but were ways to put us down. So in sociology, someone came up with the idea that we were superwomen, but even Superman had his kryptonite. That's what I say
Mm.
too, because doing this superwoman thing can create lots of unpleasant circumstances. And those
Mm-hmm.
unpleasant circumstances create dis-ease. So yes, I spent a lot of time talking about stress because people just say, well, I'm stressed. But I wanted them to understand what stress actually is. And of course, it varies. You have varying degrees of it, and you have good stress, you have bad stress. A wedding, that's good stress. Funeral, maybe bad stress. And it also depends on the person. Some people aren't affected by what someone else would be, but they use the word stress.
Mm.
So we have to go through that. But when you are stressed, whatever that means to you, you have two glands that sit on top of your kidneys. They're adrenal glands. And I'm sure everybody, I would think many of your viewers have heard the word
Yeah,
adrenaline.
we're pretty nerdy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So adrenaline is real. Adrenaline is something that creates problems in the system, especially if it goes on and the stress is chronic. So adrenaline can expand blood vessels or it can contract blood vessels. Adrenaline, and then there's cortisol. Adrenaline is more responsible for blood pressure. Cortisol is more responsible for diabetes.
Mm.
So we have both of those situations coming from that organ because of the hormones that organ emits and releases. And
Mm.
so then you find yourself, those who are diabetic, finds themselves not being able to control blood sugar because they're no longer insulin sensitive. So we can't get the sugar in the blood into the cells where it should be, especially if we're trying to do something like fight or flight. And then then we have blood vessels expanding or contracting, depending upon what's going on because of adrenaline. So I wanted people to understand this is not just a word. This is a
Mm.
physiological response that then creates your circumstances called hypertension and diabetes,
Mm.
typically type 2 diabetes. So, and then when the stress happens, as I just said, then we get into behaviors that increase the possibility of the diabetes or the hypertension. We're eating fast foods, we're eating cookies, we're eating cakes, pies, candy, and things that we think will reduce the stress, but it actually creates more damage. And then I wanted to talk about what does it that what is it that can decrease the stress? Well,
Mm.
certainly exercise is the number one and the best drug there is.
Mm.
Exercise is the best drug there is, period, hands down. It changes your mood, it changes your attitude, it changes your internal environment. Exercise is the best drug there is, free drug. And it doesn't have to be an hour. People think, oh, I got to go to the gym for. No, you don't have to go to the gym for an hour. If you have 10 minutes, I start my patients with 10 minutes 3 times a week, literally.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
walk. Now, I will increase it to race walking for some of them, and I
Mm.
will increase it to the gym for some of them. But I start with 10 minutes 3 times a week. You have, and if you don't have 3 minutes, you have to take 3 minutes. Nobody's going
Mm.
to give it to you. You
It's
have to
like that Chinese proverb. If you don't have 10 minutes to meditate, take an hour. That's it.
I
Yeah.
heard that. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. I mean, nobody's going to give it to you. It's not going to come easily, but you have to take it. That's
Mm.
what you have to do. You have to make the time and you have to take the time. And again, it does not have to be an hour. Don't think of it that way because then you'll never do it. You say, I don't have an hour. Some days I have 20 minutes. So
Well,
I'll
I
do
think
20
if
minutes.
everybody looks at their average screen time,
Exactly. That's
we
true.
do. We do.
That's exactly true. That's exactly
Most
true.
of us do.
So
Yeah.
if we take time away from that screen time, then we can figure it out. That's exactly
Mm.
right. And those are the things we have to do to begin this process of healing.
Mm.
The other thing is, this is just coming, the other thing that I wrote about in the book is sleep. We don't sleep. We're not a culture that sleeps anymore. I really love my sleep and I get it because
Yeah.
it's important. Because lack of sleep, like lack of water, which I also talk about in the book, creates problems with your mentation. It creates
Mm.
problems with your concentration. It creates problems with your memory. It creates all kinds of problems. So we need to understand that this is important, just being able to sleep. And some of my patients will say, well, I go to bed at 1 o'clock and I get up at 9. No, you should go to bed the day before you wake up. So you're going to go to bed
Ooh, that's
before
a good one.
12 o'clock,
Mm.
not after 12 o'clock midnight and then wake up at 10. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying go to bed before 12, before the night is over, and then wake up the next day. Now, of course, for people who work night shift, that's
Yeah, I was going
challenging.
to ask about,
Yeah, that's challenging.
people in emergency care and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's challenging. And their weight can show that because they're
Mm.
eating poorly, their clock is all off, and that's a problem. I don't know how to fix that because they have to work,
Mm.
maybe they have to work night shifts, especially doctors who are in the ER, etc. So but it doesn't mean that you can't eat well, and it doesn't mean that you can't take the time to create the whatever you need to create for meal prep. So
Mm.
there are things that you can still do. I know one of your questions in the email was, how does a mother who's trying to, take care of
Juggle
three,
it all.
yeah, and
Mm.
she's by herself, et cetera, et cetera. One thing, small things done consistently make a difference.
Mm.
So maybe this week you just do one thing. You drink more water. Maybe you just add 1 glass of water, literally.
Mm.
Maybe you add 10 minutes to your exercise. Or maybe you start with the 10 minutes that I suggest. Maybe you go to sleep a half hour earlier. So these little things, small things done consistently make a difference because they ultimately become habits. Maybe you buy organic cucumbers, whatever it is, but
Mm.
just do one thing. And that, the more self-care, I say this in the book too, the more self-love. The more self-love, the more self-care. It's a cycle. It's a
Mm.
cycle. It's like, I did that for myself today. Don't focus on what you didn't do. Focus on what you can do and what you did do. So today I had a salad.
And
So
this takes us slowly out of everything's hard for me, I'm the victim here thinking as well. Because if you can be more proactive and less reactive, that sets off a chain of events within itself psychologically and then potentially manifesting in the physical world.
hmm And I suggest to my patients to write down in their journaling the things that they've done today to support themselves so that they can
Mm,
see, wow, did I do all that? Because you just do it and you don't realize what you're doing. But
yeah.
when you don't do something, you focus on that. So let's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
focus on what you did do, right? Let's
Yeah.
focus on what
Yeah.
you did
Yeah.
do and put that down in black and white somewhere so that you can
Mm,
go back and look at it. So these are just little tips that I tell people, just when you're doing self-care, you're doing self-love. And you ask the question, how did we get into this lack of self-love? Well, that's a very simple answer, slavery. Because
mm,
slavery not only affected the slave, it affected the master as well. There's something I have in my first book, Path to Healing, A Guide to Wellness, and I talk about how it affected the master as well as the slave because you can't treat another person, even though they didn't consider us people at the time, you can't treat another entity so poorly and think that you're not affected. Just
mm,
energetically, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, which is why they had to change us and make us chattel and make us different and make, Negro, it's synonymous with slave.
mm.
But I don't want to get too far afield here. But the point is that demarcation and that denotation created an ability to separate themselves from the slave and say, well, this is okay because
Yeah.
they're
The
African.
othering and the dehumanization.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why and how they did that. But that affected them as well, and it affected the children of the masters. And so that is how we got into this place. Because how many Caucasian women in this country don't feel good about themselves? A lot. I treat them too. Is
Yeah.
that lack of self-esteem and self-worth is not something that belongs to African American women. It belongs to, unfortunately, all women, and I treat many of them in my practice. Now, certainly it's different because of the color of our skin, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we've had such a tremendous and horrific history of sexism and racism combined, which African Americans, of course, are subject to both.
Mm. And I often find um there's a dark side to full emancipation of women sometimes, in that when you have infinite choice of now everything's on the table, you can do, be, choose to do anything, the kids, the job, the area of study, um, but without a clear line in the sand about how the domestic labor gets done, you then have all of that still, most people, most women. And we're now faced with, well, how do we fix that part? Because it's actually made us all a lot sicker. However, you then have the undertow conversation of, well, that means you've all got to go back to the kitchen and simplify your lives and become trad wives because this modern woman thing isn't working for you. And that is toxic within itself because that has a motivation underneath it,
Right,
um,
right.
by a
Well,
certain group of people. And so it's fascinating because we often think progress is, like, we're often taught then progress is bad because look at how much better you had it before when life was simpler, or whatever it might have been. But the real progress is actually, how do we do life better for all the
for
time?
all of
Like,
us, yeah, for
yeah,
all of us.
that's
Mhm,
progress.
mhm, mhm.
And
Progress is getting the husbands of the wives to pitch in and do what they need to do,
mm,
even though they're working too, but the wives are working also.
yeah,
So there's no difference there. Although, needless to say, there's a difference financially because women don't make as much as men do in the same job, even.
yes,
So we do need to, there's a lot of things that need fixing.
mm,
But certainly the husbands need to pitch in and do their part in child rearing and cooking. I mean, it's not like their hands are cut off or they can't read. If you can read, you can cook. It's a recipe. Read it. Get
yeah.
get the ingredients and do it. It's not something that is mystical or magical. It happens quite easily if you put things together in a pot with heat. This is not hard. This is not hard.
I did not have Andrea teaching men to cook on my bingo card for this conversation, but there it is, guys. You've learnt now. Luckily, I have a husband who's a great cook, and my son,
All
even
right.
better, who's 16. He's amazing.
All right. I
Yeah.
like it. I
No,
like it.
we are a share the load family.
And I bet they can run the vacuum too. They can figure out where that cord goes into the
Mm-hmm.
wall.
Yep. Yep. Although that's actually my favorite job, so I keep that one.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, and you can have
They
that.
clean the bathrooms. Yeah.
You can have those jobs. That's totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so can we come back to sleep? Because I think sleep is tricky and I'd love for some more nerdy kind of support here when a lot of people would love to sleep better, but they simply don't. Whether
Well,
that's waking up in the night, whether that's
yeah.
finding it really hard to get to sleep, whether it's getting up to pee 1,000 times in midlife, or, so just some help to make our quality of sleep better
Right.
would be awesome.
So first of all, turn off the television. Turn it off. Have these people, well, my TV is on a timer. It goes on. Yeah, but before it goes off, you're taking in all the electromagnetic rays of the television. So if somebody got chopped up and put in the trunk of the car, you're taking that in because you've
Yeah.
watched FBI or whatever the stuff is they have on TV, because I don't watch it. I just hear about it. So you're watching all that, even if you're not watching it. It's coming into your system and into your energy. So turn the
Mm.
TV off. Forget the
My
timer.
naturopath said that to me. She said, if you want the TV, stick to light, lovely, fluffy, funny,
Yeah, Hallmark or something.
sweet little.
Mhm.
She's like, your constitution cannot take
No,
criminal thriller investigations. That is
no,
not what you need. And it was the
no.
best. This was 20 years ago. It was the best advice.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm,
nobody's can really. I mean, nobody's constitution can take that, but we do it for whatever reasons. So that's the first thing. Turn off the television. The second thing is you have to have your room at a comfortable temperature. So these
mm,
people that sleep in 75-degree weather, I get that you may be cold-blooded, but turn it down to 65 and put on a comforter and put on some pajamas. But the 75 is not going to work. It's not working. It can't work
mm-hmm,
because your body needs a certain amount of chill, so to speak. The other thing is don't drink water after dinner because that will keep you up. People say, well, I get so thirsty after dinner. Well, you haven't had enough water during the day. I
mm-hmm,
start patients with take a liter of water first thing in the morning, boom, before you do anything. Wait 20 minutes, have your breakfast. If you want to exercise during that 20 minutes, that's great. Then have your breakfast. Then in between breakfast and lunch and dinner, have more water. Nothing after dinner. And hopefully your dinner is maybe finished by 7, and you get to bed at 11, so you have 4 hours that you can urinate and do all those things. Generally speaking, that helps and that works.
mm.
The other thing is you don't want to be on your phone. People get on their phones before bed and I'm just scrolling. No, why? There's nothing there that you need to know before bedtime. Or they want to read. So stay away from reading as well. So
Wow. I've interviewed 400 people for 50 now. Never heard stay away from reading
stay
before
away from
bed.
reading because it stimulates your mind. It
Uh,
stimulates your mind. Now, if you want to do a meditation that puts you to sleep, okay, I kind of go for that. But not reading, not the television, not talking on the phone, not scrolling. Forget the girlfriend who just wants to talk at 11 o'clock at night. No, no,
mm,
because that interrupts your focus. You take a shower, that shower preferably is a hot shower, warm shower, go to bed. So I have people that would say, well, I take a shower, then I clean up the dishes, then I do. No, take a shower and go to bed.
I am the queen of, oh, and I'll just get this ready for, oh, and I've just got to get my son's uniform. Oh, I've just got
No,
to,
you're going to
yeah.
do all of that before you take your shower.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Do all of
All right.
that before you take your shower. Then you're going to go to shower, bed, shower, bed. There's nothing in between. Nothing in between.
Ooh, challenge accepted.
Yeah,
Okay.
shower,
Mm,
bed, nothing in between. So
mm-hmm,
those are things you have to focus on because your sleep is important.
mm,
You can't be without it. I mean, literally, your brain needs rest. When people don't get enough sleep, they think they want more food. They don't want more food. They want energy, but they want it in the form of sleep, not food. And so then you find yourself nibbling and crunching on things all day long because you don't have enough energy because you haven't had enough sleep. It's very
Mm.
different. It's
Yeah.
very different. Yeah. So we
Yeah.
don't want to do that.
No.
The other thing I just want to point out is, in terms of diet, just be sure that it's to the best of your ability that you are eating organically. Because if you're
Mm.
not, you're just definitely opening yourself up to all kinds of inflammation and disease. And in addition to the physical stress and the mental emotional stress, then you've got problems. You've got
Mm.
inflammation for sure.
And it's a tricky one, right? Because organic, if you go produce conventional to produce organic, it's quite hard to not have that cost more. It
Oh, yeah,
just is.
true.
And so for a lot of people, that's like, oh, what do I do? But I come back to what you were saying. I said it too in my second book. Like, think of one or two high volume foods in your trolley and like start there. Just make the apples organic. If your kids
Hmm.
chomp through like 2 kilos of apples a week,
Hmm. Hmm.
just swap those, or the
Hmm.
carrots or something, the milk if you drink dairy, because that makes a big difference too, because it's a high volume thing. And
Hmm.
then, ooh, is there somewhere you can get that on a discount, a CSA box? Can you jump
Hmm.
into
Hmm.
a network, a
Hmm.
co-op? Like, you have to get creative
Yeah.
sometimes.
And the farmers markets, and now many at the farmers markets, at least here, they can't afford to have the organic stamp. It's not that they're
Yeah.
not organic, so you need to just ask them. But they
Mm.
won't have a big sign that says organic. So you
Yeah.
won't, but ask them, how is this raised? And typically, if it's local, there's much less preservatives than if it was coming from California to the East Coast, right?
Mm.
So you can kind of think about that and figure that out. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a possibility too. And one other thing I want to say is laughter is so important.
Yay. It's my
Laughter is so
favorite.
important. Yeah,
Mm.
it's so important.
Mm.
So just laugh more. Laugh more. I
Mm.
mean, because it's really it's really it's just, I mean, if you just do this, you're smiling versus
Yeah.
your
Mm.
mood changes. Or if
Mm.
you're looking up versus looking down, your mood
Mm.
changes. I mean, it does. So just laugh more. Find something to laugh about. Maybe it's a TV show that you think is funny in the morning, not at night.
Yeah, not at night. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are things that you can do to increase your overall health.
Mm.
And tell yourself, if you have to stand in the mirror, which I've done years ago, and tell yourself you love yourself, do that. Do that. Do whatever it takes to love yourself to get to this thing called self-care. Do
Mm.
whatever it takes, whatever it takes. Yeah. I just want to show my book, although this is a softback and it doesn't have the award that I won for it.
Congrats, by the way.
Yeah,
I
thank
love this cover because the collage of all the things, it really hits you. You're like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
that's life.
yeah.
And probably a few more. Mm.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm very happy with it. Very happy
It's a
with it.
brilliant book. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for writing it. I
Thank
feel
you so
like I learnt a lot more about African American women uniquely,
uh
in this, and yet found so many times myself saying, yeah, that's us women too,
That's right.
that's the
That's right.
it's and so link arms instead of othering. That's always my message, because we've
Right.
got a lot more in common than we are different.
That's right. That's right. And we
Mm.
need to just begin to share and talk about it and be with one another. But
Mm.
in the United States, of course, they're trying to divide us so terribly. But when I get out there and I protest, I see all the different colors of people and I'm just so
Mm.
happy. I'm just
Yeah.
so, makes me so happy. Yeah.
Well, and do you know where it made me so happy on the weekend? At a wedding. There was every different type of person at this wedding, and I just think coming together in community, you
Mm-hmm.
realize communities are rainbows. That's what we are. We're all different types of people.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to live nice,
Mm-hmm.
have opportunity, and
Mm-hmm.
have good times and
Mm-hmm.
work hard. Like, it's not actually that much that most people are after. So
Right.
let's
Right.
let's get
Right.
busy looking
Right.
after ourselves so we can look after that communal goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
That's true. That's true.
yeah.
So never give up. That's what I would say. Never give up. That's what my mother used to say. Never give up. Yeah.
Was
Whatever
she
it
the one
is.
that sent you back to that naturopathy school to finish?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I knew I wanted to be a naturopath. I just didn't know how long it was going to take me and how I could get back there. After I did the spiritual work that I did, I knew that I was going back, and I went back the next year. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you did. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. It was wonderful to meet you,
You
and
too. Thank
I
you, Al.
encourage everybody to read your book.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in listening to this week's show. If you're not already subscribed or following the show on whatever platform you listened, please do that now. It helps enormously in terms of getting this show out to more people. Another way you can connect and support the work we do so that we can support you in your low tox life is join us in the Low Tox Club. You'll get access to amazing member masterclasses where we invite some of our best show guests for a live Q&A with members. You also have great shopping discounts from low tox businesses and honestly, the nicest low tox community Facebook group that exists on the internet. I do hope you join us there. It costs just the price of a coffee a month on average. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and Low Tox Club is the first option there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.